I want to come back to I know somebody who knows you, who's known you for a long time, who, when they found out that I was going to be talking to you, had things that they wanted to know. Just having known you back in the day when you worked for Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to tell you who it is. And one of the questions that they had,
you're not going to at least tell me who it is.
No. One of the questions that they had, lots of people have asked me questions that, oh, please ask Omarosa this, and a lot of them revolve around things like the Central Park Five. You studied Donald Trump. You studied who he was. You were very honest in the book about seeing his misogyny, about watching him on the set be very vulgar toward women, about him being creepy toward his daughter. And so you did know the negatives at the time as well as the positives. On race, you even talk about, at a certain point during the campaign, talking to him about the Central Park Five, trying to convince him that these young men were not guilty. What was his response when you tried to explain to him that the Central Park Five were actually not guilty?
It's interesting, Donald Trump tried to give me a history lesson about the Central Park Five, and he said they admitted guilt. They admitted that they carried out these acts. You weren't there, Omarosa. They actually pleaded guilty and said that they did these acts. And he explained that they didn't come, the truth didn't come forward for years later. And he felt that he was being judged by information he had at that time based on them being exonerated years later. When he explained that to me, I gave him the benefit of the doubt that there was a time difference. But what he's continued to do, now that he knows the truth, now that there is DNA evidence, now that they have completely been exonerated, and he still continues to hold on towards the hate and animosity he has against these gentlemen, it's unacceptable. And it shows you how illogical he is and how married to his hate he is.
And a lot of people, I think, have wanted to know sort of what was going on in your mind as you're watching things like Donald Trump retweeting Nazis during the campaign, David Duke coming out with this sort of full-throated support, the so-called alt-right glomming onto him. As an African-American woman, you're sort of the person who's being called upon to answer for this, to explain this to your community.
And I talk about in the book how important it was to be that African-American that took him to task on every single one of these things. Sure, I could have quit in protest, but then there would be a void of a voice and someone to advocate for us. Right now, Joy, in the White House, there is no African-American representation. There are no African-American senior staffers. There are no African-American assistants to the president. And so they're making decisions about us without us. Now, people can agree or disagree whether or not there should be representation. I happen to believe there should be. It shouldn't be me because I'm out, but I'll tell you that we still need African-American leadership, African-American civil rights leaders to go and fight for the things that are important for advancing our community. That hasn't changed for me. We still need a voice.
One of the things that is stirring in the book is you write about what really was it for you. That you write about Charlottesville really being a turning point in terms of your perception of Donald Trump, in terms of you, as you said, sort of the cult kind of thing wearing off and sort of waking up. But at that point, that was the summer of 2017, you didn't resign. In fact, no one resigned in protest over Charlottesville. Do you now look back and wish that you had? You have a flair for the dramatic, as Donald Trump does. You learn from the best. Had you resigned as the only African-American woman staffer in the White House, as the senior most African-American in the White House other than Ben Carson, if you had resigned, it would have been a tidal wave. Why didn't you resign?
Yeah, the reason I didn't resign is because there were 100 students, 100 representatives from historically black colleges and universities. They're called HBCU All-Stars. And I have been preparing this conference that was going to happen in September, the White House Conference on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And I called Armstrong Williams and I said, I'm going to quit. This is it. I'm done. And he said, you can't let those students down. You've been working. You can't just leave and protest. You have to find someone to take your place. You have to find a way to make sure these initiatives are carried out. Just like Gary Cohen, who stayed on after Charlottesville for months and months because he had financial issues on the table. There were issues that were important to me that I couldn't just throw up my hands. Sure, I could have left in protest, and yet those students would have never had the experience of a lifetime to come to Washington, to see how government works firsthand. I wouldn't have had an opportunity to go to the UN. I wouldn't have an opportunity to continue to work on issues of Haiti, of Flint, all of these things that were important to not just throw up my hands and leave. But I certainly knew that January 20th of 2018 would be my kicker, the end of my time in the White House. Unfortunately, as you see in the book, General Kelly decided that the Situation Room would be a better way to end my time in the White House, locking me there and making threats, saying things will get ugly for me and there would be damage to my reputation. And so, that's all in Unhinged. I think it's important for people to read the entire story and not just take little slivers of it, because this is my life story and it's the true journey of how I overcame so many obstacles to get where I am today.
No, it is a full story. I mean, for those who have not read the book yet, and it's a bestseller, so a lot of people have already read it. But yeah, you do go through your entire life story. You talk about John Kelly. You open with the firing, with being pulled into the Situation Room in order for John Kelly to fire you. And you write a lot about him. Do you think John Kelly's racist?
Oh yeah, I mean, John Kelly thought the Civil War was about compromise. It wasn't about compromise, General John Kelly. It was about slavery.
You also write that John Kelly never met with you, that he never had any time of day for you, but you also write that you believed at the time that he was firing you that it was because somehow he knew that you knew that there was an N-word tape from Donald Trump's Apprentice days. How would he know that if he didn't even interact with you?
Because there's a whole email chain. You're the first one to ask me that, Joy, and I'm so glad you asked. Because as I've stated, everything that's in my book can be corroborated, it's documented and verified. On that day, the first email I sent that morning was to Hope Hicks, and Hope Hicks has, I mean, the email will become public because they're government emails. I sent an email to Hope explaining to her I was concerned about the chatter I was hearing, that someone was about to release this tape. Hope responds to me and she says, we've already contained this, or we already dealt with this, which I thought was interesting. And because of that exchange, that happened in the morning at 10 a.m. By 5 o'clock, I got an email from John Kelly, assistant, saying that he wanted to meet with me in the Situation Room. It's hard to ignore the coincidence that I had that exchange in the morning, and by the afternoon or the evening he was locking me in the Situation Room making threats.
Very interesting. I definitely would love to read that.
Yeah, tons of emails about that, and the White House knows this, Hope Hicks knows that, and I'm sure John Kelly knows that.
I have to ask you this question because you do mention having the emails, you've released some tapes, you have some video and some audio tapes. When you went into the White House, when you took that job, did you have the intention of ultimately writing a book? Is that why you kept so many recordings and made so many recordings?
No, my intention was to serve my country. When I took my oath to the Constitution, to this country, I took it very seriously. This is my second tour of duty working in the White House. I know the importance of working and serving for your country and trying to help improve the lives of African Americans throughout our community. And so I took my job very seriously. I am an author. This is my third book, so certainly this is what I do. I'd like to write about my experiences, but my intention was to serve my country and to do it honorably.
But you definitely were recording the whole time, and were you doing it with the intention of writing a book? I mean, there was an issue with April Ryan, who was a friend of yours for a long time, that you said was recorded. So were you recording with the intention of her?
Because it's funny you mention her because you know, no one has really even acknowledged the fact that the story that she manufactured in December has been debunked.
Has it?
I mean, I think it's pretty sad. It has. I mean, I have a tape of the beginning from the moment I went into the Situation Room to the end.
But again,
her narrative was that happened in a different space.
Right.
But I don't want to spend time on her. It's a colossal waste of time. What I will say to you is that I wanted to tell people and give them an opportunity to see for themselves what's happening in the White House. Your taxpayer dollars go towards funding our salary and making sure that this country is run well. You have a right to pull the curtain back and see what happens in the Oval Office, what happens in the Cabinet Room, what happens on Air Force One. That's why I wrote this book, because people need to know about what's happening in a Trump White House. And I'm so glad that they're responding well. Obviously, it's at the top of the list, the New York Times bestsellers list. I'm glad that people are giving me their feedback. And Joy, I'm so glad that I had a chance to sit down and talk with you. Now I've got to run to go give a speech.
Yes, absolutely. I have one last question before we go. I know.
But I'm glad that we had a chance to chat after your vacation.
Yeah, well, this is our